Okay, let's get straight to business. We're ranking all of the mainline Final Fantasy games, and we're also going to include a few extras. I just picked this tier list at random from Tier Maker so I can do this easily, but they threw in some extra ones, so I'm going to do that as well. Now, I did this recording before, and when I did this recording, it went horribly wrong because I didn't really go into detail on why my favourite Final Fantasy game is so good, and I was kind of disappointed in it. And I'm going to redo this, so you're going to see the second take of this video. So, without further ado, let's begin with our ranking, and we're going to start with the very first Final Fantasy game. So, obviously, this is where the Final Fantasy series began. This is one of the earlier JRPGs out there, so you got to bear that in mind. And obviously, this has old school turn-based. Now, you know me, you know I don't like old school turn-based combat. And you'd be right, I don't. But here's the thing, this is one of the first JRPGs ever made, you know? So, obviously, because of that, you have to consider the fact that old school turn-based is a given. But because of that, I do feel that I have to cut it some slack, and I have to look back at what I, like when I played it back in the day, and honestly, when I played this game back in the day, I actually really liked this game. And I was really into it. Now, I borrowed this game off a friend originally. I mean, I later got my own copy on PSP, but I played the PS1 version, which I borrowed off a friend. So, I've played through this game twice, and it's, I mean, for a time, it's a really fun JRPG. I think there's better out there, but I think, given the fact that this was the first Final Fantasy game, like, for an early JRPG, I'd say this one holds up surprisingly well despite the old school turn-based combat. And, I mean, if I was reviewing this game, I would definitely say, you know, if you like me and you can't tolerate old school turn-based, then absolutely avoid this game. Do not play this game because it's just going to piss you off. And, yeah, nobody wants to be pissed off. But if you don't mind that, then you probably like this game like I did as a kid. Now, would I want to go back and play this game today? Probably not, given the fact that I don't like old school turn-based combat. But I will give it some leeway and put in adequate category because I do think that this was a good start for the series in retrospect, and I do think that for the time, this game was pretty monumental. And I think that they, like, with remakes, they've made it a little better over time, and it's one of those games that's really easy to just go back to that has old school turn-based, but it still has old school turn-based nonetheless. So yeah, like, one thing I would give this game is it has pretty good music. Like, it's not the best soundtrack ever, but it really does, like, have some good music. I mean, I feel that some of the remakes made the music even better. Like, some of the music in, like, the remake versions, like the Temple of Chaos, for example, like, that music is amazing. Like, it really is good. And obviously, like, the story isn't really much. I mean, it's just, you're just playing as, like, 4 characters that you name yourself, going around the world collecting crystals and then fight the big bad at the end. There's nothing special about the narrative, but you do get to go through some cool dungeons, I guess, in terms of, like, theme, but, like, there's nothing, no frills with this, which you'd expect. But, as I say, it's the first Final Fantasy game. I can't really say too much on it other than that. I can't knock it too much, but yes, I wouldn't go back to it, but I would consider it adequate for the sake of the video, just simply because I feel that I deserve to give credit where credit's due, given the fact that it is an old game, and I do want to respect that fact. Now, that's not to say that I'm basing this off my previous experiences with the games, because I won't. But with this game, I will give it an exception, given the fact that I recognise its age. The same thing goes for Final Fantasy II. You see, Final Fantasy II is a game that a lot of people do not like, and the reason why is because of how you level up by using the same move over and over and over again. Now, the thing is, that personally didn't bother me so much, But what did bother me, obviously, in nowadays, is the fact that it has old school turn-based, just like Final Fantasy I. But what would I say is better? I mean, Final Fantasy I would say has the better music, but I think Final Fantasy II is better in every other way. It's better than everything else. So I'm putting it at adequate because, and the reason why I'm putting it at adequate despite the fact that it has old school turn-based is, once again, this is an NES RPG, so of course it's going to have old school turn-based whether you like it or not, which I will respect that. For the time, it had old school turn-based, I get it. But one thing I will give Final Fantasy II is that, and I'm actually going to put it higher than 1 for this reason, it actually had an interesting story. Mildly interesting, but it was different. It wasn't about collecting crystals. It was about, and that's the thing, if you look at all of like Hironobu Sakaguchi's games, like the bulk of them are about crystals. This game is not about crystals, and that's interesting. This game is all about like this evil empire that's oppressing like the nations, and like it's kind of interesting where they go with it, and it's surprisingly pretty dark for like old school Final Fantasy game, and I kind of liked that. I mean, yeah, I feel that the adventure aspect in this one is a little better, but this one, you feel like this air of oppression throughout the game. It has that atmosphere, that oppressive atmosphere throughout, and it's much darker, like much darker, which is surprising. But like at the same time, it does have its problems. I'm not going to deny that, but I do think that it is still, for the time, a really good game. Now, does it hold up today? In my opinion, no, I won't go back to it because it has old school turn-based combat, but I'll give it the benefit of the doubt given its time. Now this game, on the other hand, I'm not going to give the benefit of the doubt. Final Fantasy III gets boring to you because Final Fantasy III is literally a step down from Final Fantasy II in every single way, and it's not got the good aspects that Final Fantasy I had, in the sense of like the music. The music in Final Fantasy I is better than 3, and the story is better in 2. So 3 finds itself in the worst of both worlds. It's got a boring story, mediocre music, and it's just completely uninteresting and boring. Like, I'm going to be honest, I didn't finish this game. I finished the first 2, but I never finished 3, and the reason why I never finished 3 was because it was just so boring. I just couldn't get into 3 at all. I didn't like the old school turn-based, for one. Like, I get that this game is old like the others, but like, on top of that, just the game just didn't feel interesting. It just felt like they were just doing Final Fantasy I again, but it just wasn't as good. That's kind of how I felt about Final Fantasy III. I'm not going to waste any more time on it, that's why it's boring to you. Right, so Final Fantasy IV, if I can find it here. Here we go. Final Fantasy IV has numerous versions, and these versions are all very different. I don't even know where to begin, but Final Fantasy IV was one of the earlier Final Fantasy games I played. I could actually say that this was my second Final Fantasy game, but because I played like this at the same time as another Final Fantasy game, it could be my third, I forget. But yeah, Final Fantasy IV was it was a really interesting one for the time, because this is where they actually started to have a more fleshed out story. Before Final Fantasy IV, the stories were very simple and straightforward. Final Fantasy IV kind of followed what 2 did in the narrative department, and it focused more on more deeper narrative, and more interesting characters and stuff, and it had more depth in its narrative. But it also was the first Final Fantasy game to introduce the ATB battle system, which is fantastic because that means that it's not old school turn-based, and I love it. Now, here's the thing about Final Fantasy IV. I've never finished this game, but I've got right to the end of the game, to the final boss, and I've never beat it. Never beat the final boss of this game. But what I can say about Final Fantasy IV is the game is a lot of fun, especially for the time. I do think there's better games out there. I do. Believe me, I do. I don't think that it's the best Final Fantasy, but I do have a soft spot for this one. I feel that out of all the Final Fantasy games, it's one of the better ones, and I do feel that it does deserve some praise. So I'm going to put it inadequate but I'm going to put it above 2 because, and here's the thing, this game was a huge improvement from 1 and 2, especially 3 at the time. And while the story, and I will say this, and you'll find out about when we get to Final Fantasy IV in the after years, I'll talk about the spin-offs later. When we get to Final Fantasy IV in the after years, you'll see what I mean by this. The story of Final Fantasy IV has not aged well. It has not. By today's standpoint, like by today's standards, it's not really anything original. It's not really anything special. But for the time, it was really good. And I've got to praise it for that. And I feel that with the DS version, especially, like, it's hard, it's brutal. I never finished it for that reason because of how hard it is, but I do think that the combat has a nice amount of depth to it, and I think it's one of the more interesting ones because you have those extra commands that you can learn on your characters, and you can kind of choose to teach certain commands to certain characters. Like, for example, you can teach Cry to Kane if you want, like I did, which was hilarious. I couldn't help myself. And, you know, like, I thought that was really cool. So they've definitely reworked this game a lot. They've made a lot of different remakes and versions of Final Fantasy IV. Like, there's more versions of Final Fantasy IV than any other Final Fantasy game, it seems. And it's crazy. But yeah, there's a version for everyone though. I mean, the US version's the easiest version, and the DS version's the hardest. But yeah, that's my take on Final Fantasy IV. Like, it's not really an outstanding game as a JRPG, but it's one of the better Final Fantasy games. Right, so next up is the other second game I played in Final Fantasy series, and that's Final Fantasy V. I had the anthology, which came with both 4 and 5, because I have the PAL anthology because I'm from the UK. So I played Final Fantasy VII first. That was my first Final Fantasy game, and my second Final Fantasy game was Final Fantasy Anthology, which I borrowed from a local library, and it came with 4 and 5. Now, here's the thing about 5. I never finished 5 when I first borrowed it, and I got stuck on a boss, and I couldn't get past it. And the same thing goes for 4 as well, but the difference between 4 and 5 is, while 4 is one of the better Final Fantasy games, 5 is the best Final Fantasy game. 5 is just absolutely the quintessential classic JRPG experience. This is literally the benchmark for every single 90s JRPG. This is it, the definitive 90s JRPG. That is what Final Fantasy V is. It is arguably the most definitive 90s JRPG for me, and like, the best way I can describe Final Fantasy V is it's this epic adventure. It's this fun, light-hearted adventure that doesn't take itself so seriously. It's really quirky and goofy, but at the same time, like the concept of this game's world is crazy. It's basically a game for people who want that feeling of adventure. That's what this game is all about. For people who want to go around all of these unique, interesting worlds and like this crazy like concepts. Like, I suppose that speaks to me a lot. I'm into that sort of thing with games. I love games that have surreal worlds to explore, and that's my jam. And I feel that Final Fantasy V was kind of like the first Final Fantasy game. I mean, Final Fantasy IV had a little bit of it with like the whole moon sort of thing, but Final Fantasy V took that to the next level. Like, it's just a really cool game, and it didn't take itself seriously, which is something that bothers me about Final Fantasy. I feel that a lot of the Kitase Final Fantasy games are a bit pretentious with their narrative and their themes and stuff in retrospect, and you know, like, I just don't really resonate with them anymore, but I still resonate with this one. I still resonate with Final Fantasy V. This is a game that I can still go back to and still get joy playing this game, and it's the only Final Fantasy that I actually can and will go back to and genuinely enjoy. Just simply because it feels the least pretentious. It feels like its own standalone thing. It doesn't feel like a Final Fantasy game at all. It feels like its own unique game. I mean, you could argue that it feels more like a Dragon Quest game, but the difference between Final Fantasy V and Dragon Quest is that Final Fantasy V has ATV combat and a job system, and yeah, like there's some really cool dungeons that you go to in this game, like really cool dungeons, and like the music's really amazing as well. I mean, this is Nobuo Uematsu's best work right here, like without a doubt. I mean, it's not my favourite soundtrack in the Final Fantasy series, but it's my favourite soundtrack from Nobuo Uematsu in the Final Fantasy series. I mean, I'm not sure how it holds up with Lost Odyssey, right? But they're very close. But like this one's definitely my favourite in the Final Fantasy series for sure. I just love this game. I just love how the bosses in this game, like, you encounter so many boss fights that are just so weird and quirky, and some of them actually have dialogue, and it's just so cool, and I just love that. The playful nature of 5, it just makes it so unique, and they never really went back to this. This was the only game that really has that feel to it. That campy feel that I feel that was lost in the Kitase era, where everything became so serious and like melodramatic, and that's kind of gonna be a theme with this list, because that's kind of gonna impact how I feel about a lot of the later Final Fantasy games. But Final Fantasy V, man, like, I've only just talked about the beginning of this game. Like, we haven't even talked about the combat in this game yet, because the combat in this game has a job system just like Final Fantasy III, but it has active time battle system. Oh yes, this is the perfect combination. Not only that, but they also made the job system even better, because you can mix jobs. So you can have like you can take certain skills from the job and like keep those skills after you've like learned those skills from that job, and then you can get another job and carry over the skills you learned to that other job, and you can just mix and match the skills from each job. And there's even a job that lets you basically just create custom jobs, and like you start off with like freelancer, which can be like whatever jobs you want, but it won't level up. So there's a lot of customization in this game that I really like, and there's a lot of builds and setups that you can have, and it's so much fun, like coming up with unique like jobs to choose from with every playthrough, and it gives this game a lot of replay value. And I really love the post game in this game, because like the final part of this game, like you have so much to do, but at the same time it's kind of like you'd think in certain ways that let's put it this way, the final part of this game, like the final third of this game is literally just pure optional content. You can just skip right to the end of the game, but the thing about it is the way the optional content is handled in this game is so great, because it's just so rewarding, and they even manage to like have little story segments in it and like all of that. The thing is that this isn't the hardest post game out there, but it's definitely the most fleshed out. Like if you just want to finish the game there and then, you can, but if you want more of it, if you want to indulge in it, there's an entire, like, I don't want to spoil it, but there's an entire section of the game which is just pure optional content that it feels like meaty optional content. It's not some last minute stuff, like this is something that you're kind of sort of expected to go through, even though you don't have to, and it's just so great. Like, I just love this game to death. It is without a doubt the best Final Fantasy game, hands down. So next we're going to talk about Final Fantasy VI. This was where Kitase got involved, and you can tell because now the game has a much more serious setting, and it's a little bit more darker because now you've gone similar to like to the Evil Empire, but I feel like with this one it's a little bit more transparent with its themes, and I feel that with the Super Nintendo they were able to like generate some like aesthetics that 2 couldn't, that really allowed it to bring in more like interesting landmarks and more interesting like aesthetic locations. For example, you have the town of Zozo, which is like a ghetto town, and you know, you have places like the Opera House, and you know, like these places stand out because they represent a kind of like they kind of represent sort of like it's sort of like what humanity, like, because if you look at like opera houses, it's, and I'm going to bring this up, I can't help it, I know I bring this game up every time I talk about this sort of stuff, but if you've played the game Painkiller, there's a level which is literally called Opera House, and there's also a level called Dead City. Like, Zozo and the Opera House in 6 are literally Dead City and the Opera House in Painkiller, and they kind of represent the same thing, and it's all about, like, humanity's sins. The Opera House is this opulent place where all these wealthy people go to have entertainment, and the thing about it is, and the point of it is that it's supposed to represent greed and like sort of like a gluttonous sort of activity that people would do that would basically showcase their wealth that they basically stolen from the poor. And it's just kind of like this whole class separation thing, and you have like these things for like the upper class, and you know, you have like Zozo to show like the deprived part of society and rogues and bandits, you know, and the thing about Final Fantasy VI is that it's a very fleshed out game. I'd say out of all of the Final Fantasy games, this is the most fleshed out in terms of characters and world design and everything else. Final Fantasy VI, it has aged like fine wine. It honestly has. Like, this game has aged extremely well, and I think that it's definitely the game in the series that, like, just like 5, that I would potentially go back to because of just how well it has aged. The thing about it is, though, is because it's such a serious game, and, you know, like, I suppose I've been spoiled because I've played a lot of JRPGs. So, for me, Final Fantasy V, you can't replace Final Fantasy V for me because that is one of a kind in what it is. Whereas Final Fantasy VI, it's just another one. And that's just a personal thing from me because I've experienced so many games that are like this, where they are dark and broody, like Valkyrie Profile, for example. Like, that series is just on a whole other level. But I do still appreciate the fact that Final Fantasy VI, especially for its time, was so fleshed out. I mean, is it the best JRPG ever made? Absolutely not. Like, there's better out there, and that's why I've learned over the years. But it was, at one point, my favourite JRPG of all time. At one point, it was. And for good reason, because it is a really good game. Now, is it flawless? No, it does have its issues. I feel that the difficulty of this game is a little bit too much on the easy side. Outside of a few like vague moments, like for example, like the whole Blitz tutorial was terrible, and that's mainly what the hardest part of this game was, figuring out how to do Blitz commands. Once I knew that, the game was a cakewalk, and I think it's because you can just become so stupidly OP in this game, it's ridiculous. Like, this is probably the easiest Final Fantasy game in my opinion, and I feel that that's one of its downsides. I feel that a hard difficulty option would have been nice in this game if it was available, so that you could have a higher difficulty. I suppose you can make the game harder for yourself by like limiting things, so it's not a big deal, but it is something I did notice about the game. But I don't really feel that this is... I don't feel that makes it really a problem, because, like, honestly, 6 is up there with 5. I think 6 and 5, like, they are both the best games of what they each try to do. Like, 5 is Sakaguchi's best game, 6 is Katase's best game. You know, they are the best of each director and each director's vision. They are the pinnacle of what both directors managed to do. Now, on a personal level, I personally prefer 5, and I personally feel that 5 holds up the most, but 6 is still up there. It's still second place for me, so I still have to give it credit where credit is due. Right, so next up, we have Final Fantasy VII. Now, everybody and their mother has played this game. Either that or they've played the remake of this game, one way or another, because this is like the freaking Evangelion of JRPGs. It really is. Like, I mean, if Dragon Quest is Dragon Ball, this is Evangelion, you know? I mean, I'm not much of an anime guy, but from what I've gathered, Evangelion is kind of supposed to be the anime that everybody talks about, and I've never watched it. So for all you people who have never played Final Fantasy VII, don't worry guys, I've never watched Evangelion, so, you know, like, I can understand. I can totally understand your position, and hey, you never played Final Fantasy VII, you know, like, that's impressive. Like, not many people can say they've never played Final Fantasy VII, so give yourself a pat on the back. Now, as for whether you should play this game, well, I feel that you have to go into this game knowing a few things. Now, I know a lot of people would say, oh, I'll just play the remake. Well, here's the thing, I want to point out that Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy Remake, like, Final Fantasy VII Remake are like two completely different games, entirely. And the vibe you're going to get from each game is completely different. Like, absolutely completely different. Final Fantasy VII, the original, where it shined best is not really truly expressed in the remake. The remake focuses on the narrative, and I feel that despite everything, despite just how complex the themes are in this game, because there's a whole variety of like complex themes in Final Fantasy VII, but despite all of that, I feel that the narrative in Final Fantasy VII is pretty weak. Like, the subject matter and the concepts for the time were incredible, but the execution was not so incredible. There's a lot of things in this game that this game tries to do a lot of really cool things, and there's a lot of things that I can definitely appreciate about this game, like some of the themes that you just didn't see very often in JRPGs back in the day. And it tackled concepts that were just completely foreign at the time. You just didn't see it. Whereas nowadays, those concepts are a lot more commonly seen, and yeah, but that's kind of why this game has so much appeal. That and the fact that it was like a technical marvel. I mean, graphically, this game is just, like, for the time it came out, was phenomenal. So yeah, people rushed to this game for that reason. That's why this game is so popular. That, and obviously, like I say, the concepts, and it tries to do a lot of things. Final Fantasy VII tries to do way too many things, and that's both its biggest problem, its biggest weakness, its Achilles heel, and its biggest strength, because it tries to do so many things, and so that means that it can attract a wider audience, because different people are going to resonate with different themes. And that's why Final Fantasy VII works so well, because it resonates with so many people. The problem is, because it has so much going on, it kind of trips all over itself. Like, it literally trips over itself with the narrative, and it just left with so many holes, which explains why it has like 1 billion sequels now, right? And it's become a series of its own. And yeah, that's kind of the thing with Final Fantasy VII. It's just one of those games that sabotaged itself by being what it is. But like I say, and this is what I'm going to get straight to my personal take of Final Fantasy VII. Like, this wasn't my first JRPG. My first JRPG was Pokemon Yellow. And then I played a demo for The Legend of Dragoon, and that told me that I wanted to get into JRPGs. But I could never find a copy of Legend of Dragoon, even though I badly wanted to find a copy of The Legend of Dragoon. But then I saw this at a flea market, Final Fantasy VII, and I picked it up, and it became my second JRPG, like full JRPG, that wasn't a demo. And yeah, like, at the time, it was a huge deal, because, like, I will admit, I really wanted to play The Legend of Dragoon more. That game captivated me way more than Final Fantasy VII, but I was still sucked in nonetheless. I feel that Final Fantasy VII, like, it had so much going on that I feel that I was kind of overwhelmed, especially as a kid playing this game. Like, I was too young to play this game, because this game was rated 11. Like, this game was rated 11 plus, and I was not 11 when I played this. But yeah, there's some really, like, even for an 11 plus game, like, honestly, there's some themes in this game that if this game was released today, it would be N-rated. It's crazy how this game was rated 11 plus in the UK. I mean, in America it was rated teen, but this game should have been rated M. Like, because there's so much mature content in this game and so many mature themes, but it's just that even though there's so many themes and stuff, it's just like where do they actually go with those themes? They're just kind of there. Final Fantasy VII feels like a compilation of concepts that are really interesting on the surface, but they don't really go anywhere with them. And if they do try and go somewhere with them, it kind of gets sidetracked for a more generic narrative, and that's his biggest problem. Gameplay-wise, there's not too much to say. I mean, it is what it is. You have the materia system. You have, like, it's as straightforward as Final Fantasy is gonna get. It's just basically you equip materia and you can just give anyone magic. Everyone has their own unique limit breaks and weapons, but the magic setup and like the ability setup is all customizable to some degree, but it's all via materia. And while I do prefer the job system of 5 over the materia system, just simply because it's less convoluted, and honestly I just like the whole concept of classes. I like how you can just change the attire of your characters, and not only that, and just like they all specialize in certain things. I feel like everybody can be anything in 7, and it's just kind of weird like that. But it's still decent combat-wise for the time. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, this is a PS1 game, so the pace is going to be slow. I mean, back in the day, like, this was a good thing for me as a kid, but as an adult, I don't think I'll ever revisit this game, just simply because of how much of a slog it was. Like, man, this game is long. But I want to bring up the thing that ultimately makes, and this is going to be the thing that ultimately decides my rating for this game. The one thing that impacted me the most, the one moment in Final Fantasy VII that I will never forget, and that has always impacted me, and this is the best part about Final Fantasy VII in my opinion. The best part of the game is when you leave Midgar and you finally reach the world map. There will never ever be another moment in gaming that can truly replicate that moment. That moment that you feel like you are, like even though it's a facade, that feeling of feeling like you have just entered a world of total freedom, as after you've just escaped this oppressive atmosphere of Midgar, you're finally in this huge open expanse, and the tone of the game completely changes at this point, and it becomes a lot more like, I love that. It just feels so good, and that feeling is amazing. When you hear that world map theme for the first time, which is the theme song of Final Fantasy VII, it is the best. Like, it is the best, like, overworld map, like, traditional, like, overworld map theme in gaming. Like, it is. As much as I love Star Ocean 2's world map theme and Valkyrie Profile's world map theme, this is hands down the best world map theme in video games because it's an absolute masterpiece. And I absolutely fucking love the world map theme of this game, and that's why I'm putting it inadequate. I'm going to put it before 4 because I feel like 4 ultimately had a better soundtrack overall, but there's one song in Final Fantasy VII that I absolutely love, like, and that is the world map theme. The rest of the soundtrack I'm not really big on, I'm going to be honest. The rest of the soundtrack is just kind of alright. It's not bad to say, but it's not amazing. I feel like 4, 5 and 6's soundtrack is better overall, but the world map theme of Final Fantasy VII, that song is just incredible. Absolutely incredible, and that's why it gets adequate tier. Okay, so now we head into controversial territory, because this game is a very controversial entry, and this is Final Fantasy VIII. Now, people who played Final Fantasy VII weren't sure what to expect with Final Fantasy VIII. I mean, they thought that since Final Fantasy VII was such a big deal and there were so many huge expectations for its follow-up, this game ended up being a disaster in retrospect, and it pissed a lot of people off, but some people liked it. Now, what are my thoughts on Final Fantasy VIII? This is the most complicated of all of the games that I have to rank, because Final Fantasy VIII is one of those games that as a kid, I could tolerate this game as a kid, but as an adult, there's no way I can tolerate this game now, given how I feel about video games, and given what this game's setting is all about. This game, to me, I just can't tolerate it. And I'm going to be honest, when I first played this game and I saw the setting, I was ready to quit this game. I was already ready to quit this game, but I kept playing the game, and eventually I sort of warmed up to it because it did get a little better, but at the same time, the setting, particularly at the beginning of the game, really did rub me the wrong way, and I wasn't fond of it, and that's the one thing that always held 8 back for me out of all the Final Fantasy games, just the setting. And if you're wondering what I'm talking about the fact that this game starts you off in a fucking high school. Like, this is basically, like, I've always said that Final Fantasy games, they kind of mimic other JRPG franchises. Like, I mean, you could say Final Fantasy I is Dragon Quest, like Final Fantasy V, well, you could say Final Fantasy V is Dragon Quest more than but Final Fantasy V is more Star Ocean. You'll understand what I mean when you play 5. But, like, Final Fantasy IV is actually, I kind of don't know what Final Fantasy IV is. Like, Final Fantasy IV is kind of a interesting one. I suppose Final Fantasy II is kind of just where it gets more Star Warsy. Final Fantasy VII is like the Xenogears of the series. Final Fantasy VI is, for the time, really unique, I guess. But, like, so I think the best way to describe it is Final Fantasy VII is like the Xenogears of the series, and it literally is, because it was originally supposed to be Xenogears. And Final Fantasy V is the Star Ocean game of the series, and Final Fantasy VIII is the Persona game of the series. Yeah, they literally wanted to make their own Persona game. I know, and that's what they did with Final Fantasy VIII. And I mean it, because they literally ripped off Persona with this game. You even have Personas in it. They're just renamed to GFs, and they are literally just summons from the previous games, but they are literally just Personas. That's pretty much what they are. So this is a Persona ripoff. That is what Final Fantasy VIII is. Sorry to break it to you guys, but that is basically what it is. Now, given the fact that it's a Persona ripoff, like, I'm obviously not going to like this game, but I played this game back in the day, and I will say a few things about this game that I liked first before I absolutely trash on this game. Right, first of all, I love... Disc 3 is the best part of the game. Disc 3 is without doubt the best part of the game, mainly because of the unique locations that you visit in Disc 3, which I absolutely love the city that you go to in Disc 3. And the design of the cities and the towns in this game are pretty damn good, except maybe for Timber, that was kind of lame. The music in this game, it's weird. Like, there's only a few songs in the game that I really did like, but a lot of music was just kind of meh. I think that has the worst world map theme of them all as well. Like, it's very hard to point out things that I really liked about this game, but there are moments in this game that I do appreciate, believe it or not. It's just that, because of my personal biases and everything else, this is a game that I will never play again. And it is a game that, honestly, like, despite the good things that the game did, I don't really like this game. Like, I've always said that this is a game that gave me mixed feelings, like, back in the day, like, growing up, but as an adult, I can safely say those mixed feelings of, like, there's no way I would play this game again as an adult, because in retrospect, this game really was not really that good. I mean, I've played a lot more JRPGs now, and I can safely say Final Fantasy VIII, man, it's one of those games that I just could never go back to, and it's one of those games that just does not cater to me, and I just realised that now. Back in the day, I didn't play enough JRPGs to know better. I just played this game and just thought it was alright. But now I actually have standards. And while I will admit this game does do a few things that are nice, it's not catered to me, it's not catered to my demographic. I just wish I knew it as a kid growing up. And for that reason, I know this is going to piss a lot of people off, and I know this is going to upset people, but I just want people to understand that I am not a fan of school settings in JRPGs. I'm not. And because of that, I'm going to put this at boring to you. Now, here's the thing. I understand that people are going to be pissed off at me for saying this, but Final Fantasy VIII, like, I don't think it's the worst game out there. I mean, like, I don't have that much of an issue with the battle system, even though it's got this junction system that everybody hates. I don't really have the biggest issue with that. My issue is with just the setting and just all of that stuff. I just don't like the high school stuff, and I don't like the whole military school stuff. Like, it's like Trails of Cold Steel and all that. It's like that shit. I can't tolerate that shit. I hate that stuff in games. Those are not my type of JRPGs. So obviously, I'm not really into this game's narrative at all. And I think some of the characters are just kind of obnoxious. I get that they're supposed to be teenagers and stuff, so I understand that that's a thing. So they're just going to be a bit obnoxious for that. But they did kind of get on my nerves a little bit. But did I think that the game was bad? Do I absolutely hate Final Fantasy VIII with a passion? No, I mean, I can... if you like Final Fantasy VIII, more power to you. More power to you. Like, if you like this game a lot, you know, absolutely, you know, more power to you, as I say. Good for you. You know, you keep enjoying this game. Because I do understand why you like this game. I do understand why people like this game a lot. I absolutely do. I just know that it's not for me. But for the people that like this game, you don't have to tell me why you like this game, because I know exactly why you like this game. I do. I just don't like it myself. So that's basically all I need to say on Final Fantasy VIII. Right, so next we have Final Fantasy IX. Oh boy, this is going to trigger a lot of people. Now, I wanted to redo this list specifically, not just because I wanted to talk about Final Fantasy V and I wanted to express more about Final Fantasy V. I wanted to redo this list because I wanted to fully express just how much I hate this game. I fucking hate this fucking game. This game has the worst protagonist in video game history. Absolutely, hands down, not even a contest. I despise Zidane with a passion. I despise this motherfucker. I want to strangle this motherfucker. He is a class A dickhead. He is an absolute cunt. He is a bellend if I've ever seen one. This is the character that I despise with a violent, fiery passion. And I'll tell you why. Because Zidane is literally that guy. He is that guy that... How do I explain it? He's just a typical douchebag. If you've ever met that... I think we've all met that guy in real life. That one smarmy, really like pretentious, kind of patronizing guy. Like, you've all met one before, people. That's what Zidane is. He is that guy. That guy who is so full of himself, who is so pretentious, and who is like so fucking like up his own ass and smarmy. Like, he is a smarmy dickhead for the entire game. Like, that is literally what he is. He is such a smug, smarmy piece of fucking shit. And the thing about it is that to make things even worse is he's a fucking loser. And you will find that out very quickly. He's not like Dante from Devil May Cry, who's actually like, you know, he's actually cool. I mean, he's going through some shit, but, you know, he's still actually cool. No, this guy's a loser. This guy's an absolute loser. Which, don't get me wrong, I'm not against characters who are losers. I mean, you know, there's characters who are absolute fucking losers in JRPGs that I don't mind. You know, I mean, I'm trying to think of an example here. I suppose Capel from Infinite Discovery is a good example of a loser, like, who's actually likable because you actually watch him grow as a character. You know, like, and he's actually kind of interesting and compelling. You know, so I don't mind loser characters. I just hate characters that are just dickheads. And I'm not talking about dickheads like you, though. I love those types of dickheads. Dickheads who are just pure honest and just full of integrity and just like say what they think. You know, characters that speak their mind and aren't afraid to say things that upset people. I resonate with those characters because that's me. I mean, I'm trashing on Final Fantasy IX here, people, and I've only just begun, by the way. So if you're a fan of Final Fantasy IX, you might have to get a box of Kleenex tissues because I'm going to make you. I'm going to bring you to tears by the time I'm done with this game. So You know, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the smarmy guy. Those guys that are like, they portray this image, like this virtuous image, you know, virtue signalers. That's what Zidane is. He is literally one of those virtue signalers. That's exactly what he is. He is the definition of that type of person. That type of person who comes across as this nice guy. Oh, I'm so nice. I'm so friendly. I'm such a nice guy. But deep down he's a twat, you know? Deep down he's a cunt. And he's just a little bastard that just needs a fucking thumping. That's what he is. He is literally a bastard that just needs to be thumped. Like, where do I even begin? Like, I mean, for starters, he's a womanizer. Like, he fancies himself a ladies' man, but the silly thing is, like, he's just terrible with women. Like, he is terrible with women, but at the same time, one thing that annoys me about him is that he's constantly, like, not only does he flirt with, like, Garnet all the time, but at the same time he also fucking sexually harasses her at one point. Like, no joke, he actually sexually harasses Garnet at one point, and she doesn't do anything about it. And it's just like, this guy doesn't even get comeuppance for it. Like, if you did what Zidane did in modern day society, you'd be in jail, you know? But it also just goes to show that this guy, despite the fact that he comes across as this squeaky clean guy, he doesn't really have any morals. He doesn't really have any, like, values of, like, how to treat people. Like, deep down, he's just a scumbag that has this air of, like, I'm such a cool person, I'm such a nice guy. No, he's a dick, you know? He's a dick that's pretending to be a nice guy. And he's just so patronizing about it. Like, oh my god, like, he's just so smarmy and patronizes everyone. Like, he just talks like he's better than everybody else, and like he knows better than everybody else, and like he's the guru, like he's the life coach guru. Like, that's basically what he is. He's like the Jordan Peterson of Final Fantasy. Like, assuming Jordan Peterson doesn't know anything. I mean, that's literally what he is to Vivi. He literally thinks that he is Jordan Peterson. That's literally what Zidane thinks he is. He's like this guy who's going to teach you the ways of life and how much better he is than you and how he knows everything more than you and how he's going to teach Vivi like all of these life lessons and stuff. Like, that's basically what he is. He's this pretentious scumbag who thinks that he's better than you, and he's just going to do that in the most like disingenuous, most smarmy way possible, and I despise that kind of character. But to make things worse, and this is the thing that I hate the most about Zidane, when his true colours come out. And I'm going to sort of spoil the events of Disc 3 in this game. I'm sorry guys, this is going to be a spoiler video, but I can't not spoil this, because this is a fucking moment that absolutely cements my hatred for this character. And it is a moment in Disc 3 where this character finds out about the truth of his existence, and the moment he does, he ends up becoming this complete and utter piece of shit. Like, and I mean it, like, he becomes an absolute prick to everybody. Like, and the thing that I hate the most about this is, you know, you see Zidane in his lowest moment, in a moment that he needs his friends to help him out. And you know what he does? He brushes his friends away and he says, I don't need your help. I'm going to do everything by myself because I'm a whiny emo bitch now. And it's just like, this is a guy who was talking about how he's so great and how he's so amazing, and then and trying to teach everybody all of the meaning of life and all of this like bullshit. And then the moment that he's struggling and he needs help, he just brushes everyone away. He's like, no, I'm above help. I'm above that. I'm superior to you all, so you're not allowed to help me. But I have to teach you all the life lessons. But oh no, like, you know, I've got too much of an ego to accept your help. You know, and the only reason why he snaps out of it is because if he didn't, then he wouldn't feel a fucking, like, he wouldn't have a chance with Garnet, because she basically, eventually, thankfully, like, confronts him on it and basically calls him a fucking stupid bell end and just says, stop being a cunt, Zidane, stop being a cunt. And he's just like, well, I better not be a cunt, otherwise I won't be able to get inside Garnet's panties, so I better be nice and be a bit of a simp now. But it's just like, that's the only reason why he snaps out of it, because everybody else, he just gives them the finger. And he leaves them for dead. He leaves fucking Aiko and Vivi to die. Like, absolutely, they're in this dangerous place, and he just locks them behind a gate and just leaves them for dead. And I'm like, what a dick. What an absolute fucking asshole he is. And this is why I hate his character. I know I spent this whole time just talking about Zidane, because he is the main character in this game. He's the character you're going to be playing as the entire game. So you are going to... He's a major reason why I do not like this game. But I want to talk about other reasons why I don't like this game now. And that being the pacing, I think the pacing of this game is horrendous. Like, the first disc of this game is literally just you going around in circles and going to areas that just are completely forgettable and have no real reason to exist. And they don't really add much world building either. They're just there as just places to just stop off at that you just, like, once you'll never go back to, or like never care to go back to, because they just don't matter. And then eventually it's just kind of pointless, and then you just move on to disc 2, and then disc 2 is just rinse and repeat the same cycle over and over and over again until the halfway mark, where suddenly, finally, something interesting happens. And I'll say that the best part of Final Fantasy IX is the second half of disc 2. Then you get to disc 3 and it just becomes another formula. You chasing after the bad guy, and then you end up doing stupid shit. So Zidane does the stupidest shit ever, and like falls for all the bullshit, really gets everybody fucking bummed by the main villain because of his incompetence and his stupidity. And if it wasn't for everybody else's competence, and especially Sid, I'm just gonna say that, like, everybody would have been bummed at that moment, and because of this bell end. So, you know, like, and then you get the moment that Zidane becomes a bitch, and then it's just like, yeah, and then the final part of the game is just complete nonsense, and it's just like, the pacing is just horrendous. It's just like so much of one thing on repeat, and then just suddenly, like, you get something that's mildly interesting, and it just goes back to the repetitive formula, and it's just like it's just so annoying. And some of the dungeons are really annoying, like Ibsen's castle. I fucking hate that place. It's just such a pain in the ass. Not only do you have to fucking swap your weapons around when you go in there, because stronger your weapon, the less damage you do, but you have to go through that twice because fucking Amaranth decides, I'm just way too damn cool to hang around with you losers, so I'm gonna go back in there by myself, and I'm gonna mope like Zeke Warhite in Chaos Legion about how my life is so depressing and how I need to kill myself because I didn't get my part in Doja Cerberus apparently, and so you have to go all the way into fucking Ibsen's castle again. I'm like, you piece of fucking shit, Amaranth. You absolute bellend. Like, there isn't a single character in this game that I actually like. They are all annoying. They're even more annoying than Final Fantasy VIII's cast. Even more annoying than that. Final Fantasy VIII's cast has an excuse. Final Fantasy IX's cast do not have an excuse. Every single character in this game, besides maybe Vivi's probably the only one that isn't annoying in this game. Every other character in this game is annoying in some way, shape or form. Like, you've got Garnet. Garnet's just some, like, she's just an idiot. Like, I have a lot of issues with Garnet, and this all stems from my experience with Valve Profile 2. If you want to know why I hate Garnet, go watch part 2 of my Valve Profile 2 analysis. That'll tell you exactly why I hate Garnet, because that's how you do a character art like that. That is how you do a character art like what Garnet goes through in Final Fantasy IX. Not the way that they handled it in Final Fantasy IX, because the way they handled it in Final Fantasy IX was horrendous. That character art was cheap. It was so stupid. Like, it's just like, oh yeah, she's suddenly a mute now because she's so traumatized over something that happened. And it's just like, we're just not going to write any more dialogue for her for like the entirety of disc 3 because the writers just can't be asked on holiday smoking weed or something. Like, it's just like, what? You know, you can still have traumatized characters but give them dialogue. Like, it's called being, like, it's called knowing how to write stories, you know, it's called being a good writer. Were the developers that inexperienced at writing that they had to completely remove her dialogue entirely? You know, people who go through traumas do actually talk, you know. The thing about it is you never see the traumas that are inside people. If you, in real life, do you see all these people in real life who, you know, have traumas. Do you see those traumas like show up? No. The only way you'll know those traumas is with the subtle little things, and that's what Vow 2 does right. That is what Final Fantasy IX fails, and that's why Garnet fails as a character. On top of being absolutely stupid and oblivious to everything, like she is just clueless. I mean, I know she's some sheltered princess, but come on, how does she not know what a fucking dagger is? Like, you'd think that, given the fact that she's in a castle full of guards, she'll have seen one at least once in her life, or ask one of the guards what it is, or have one of the guards teach her. How is she that stupid? How is she that dumb? How is she that clueless? Like, she's just stupid. And she just lets Zidane walk all over her. It's just like, I can't stand this weak bitch. Stand up for yourself. And, I mean, yeah, she does stand up for herself later on, basically just slap fucking Zidane, or basically do the closest thing to slap Zidane right across the head, which I think, if you asked me, like, I think she needed to slap him harder, because I think that she needed to mutilate him and just smash him with a meat tenderizer in the face repeatedly until he's a bloody mess. That's what she should have done, and that's what I would have done in her position. But as you can see, that didn't happen. And then you've got, as I say, you've got Steiner. I feel like Steiner's just kind of really annoying. Like, he's just constantly bitching at everybody, and it's this uptight guy, and it just kind of gets on your nerves, and just constantly getting pissy at everything. I mean, I guess you could say, like, he's kind of like the Albert of this game, but I like Albert in Star Ocean 6 better. Like, this guy is just, I don't know, like, I didn't really care much for him at all. And then you've got Freya. Freya was just boring. Freya is one of those characters that you forget's even there because she's so uninteresting and boring, and just, like, her entire backstory is just meaningless and you just don't care about it. And then you've got fucking Queener, who's like the joke character of the game. Like, well, the whole cast is a joke. Like, this is a cast that's worse than the cast of Star Ocean 4 people. And that's saying something. Like, Jesus Christ. And Queener is probably the least, one of the better characters in the game, because at least it's self-aware that it's a joke, you know? Even though it can be kind of annoying at times to listen to Queen say the same bullshit, at least the game recognises that it's a joke character, whereas the rest of the cast, they don't seem to recognise that fact for some reason. And as I say, Vivi is alright. Then you've got Aiko, and Aiko is basically just like, she's just that obnoxious character. There's always that one fucking jailbait character in every single game that wants to fucking hit on the protagonist who's just underage, and the protagonist is obviously not interested, but because of that demographic of people who play these games that are into minors, they have to have the character like this. So unfortunately, that's basically what Aiko is, and it's so obnoxious and annoying. It's like, oh my god, this character is fucking insufferable. Kill it with fire, now. I mean, you know, like, I did kind of feel bad when she was left to die. Like, I think that's a bit extreme, but, like, at the same time, it's like, well, you know, this character is still annoying, but it's still a kid, so you can't, I don't want kids to die, but I don't want, it's not really a character that I want to see in my JRPGs. And that's the cast. So the cast isn't particularly great. And I forgot about the most forgettable character, of course, Amarin, the Lord of the Edge, the Fellowship of the Brood. You know, of course he has to be in there. There's always one edgelord in every single game, and he's like the obligatory edgy character in the game, and he's the most generic edgelord I've ever seen. Like, how much more generic can you get? I mean, you know, I appreciate my edgelords. I mean, come on. I like Chaos Legion, for God's sake, people. Chaos Legion has fucking the edgiest characters of all time, and I love that. But Amarin doesn't even try hard enough. Like, he's just so bland with it. Like, he's just a bland edgelord. He's boring. And that's the cast. And that's before we even start on the gameplay, which, honestly, I think the combat might actually be even more brain dead than 6. I mean, 6's combat is probably the easiest, but 9's is, you know, aside from Mosba, and maybe, like, the last bosses, 9 is just a fucking joke. Like, I feel that the game is unbalanced, like, in so many ways, like, but the trans system is broken, absolutely broken. Like you could deal ridiculous damage early and just murder bosses in seconds just by abusing the trans system. It is so messed up, and like, there's so many things in this game that are just completely ridiculous. Like, for example, Like, you get equipment really late in the game that's completely outdated that you could have gone back in disc 1 if you did synthesis. And then you'll get another one of them in disc 2, and then you'll get another one of them in disc 3 from regular treasure chests. And you're just like, why? Like, none of the items in this game feel like they have any value. I mean, you get like so many elixirs in this game. Like, elixirs are supposed to be like these items that are like not plentiful. They're supposed to be these items that you, when you get them, it's like, oh nice, I got an elixir. They're supposed to feel good. You've got a really rare and valuable item. But not in this game. In this game, they're so plentiful, and you'll get so many of them that there's no real feeling of value that you're getting from getting elixirs. And some of the characters are pretty broken. I mean, Amarin is pretty broken himself. I mean, his chakra skill is like auto-life and regen at the same time. It's like, Jesus Christ, how much more OP do you want to be, you know? Couple that with freaking Quina, and you've got a really, like, because Quina has the auto-life skill, and you've got a really insane setup right there that can make you almost indestructible. And, yeah, like, then you have Vivi with his double cast spells with his trance, so he's like the most powerful character in the game because of that, because you can just like double cast flare and like deal like 9,999 damage twice, which by the way, there aren't any multi-hit moves in this game, so double cast is objectively like the best move in the game because it's multi-hit, so you can deal like max damage twice, which means that you can deal almost 20,000 damage, which is insane. And yeah, like that's kind of how messed up the combat is. But not only that, that's not really the main problem of the combat, but the biggest problem with the combat is just how slow it is. Like the transitions for the beginning of combat are really slow. The ATB gauge goes by so slowly, and everything is slow. Like the animations are really slow. Everything just feels slow and slowly. Like you play Final Fantasy VII, like the animations are nice, quick, and swift. In this game, they just take forever. I mean, I know that some of the games like Final Fantasy VIII, they have moments that take forever as well, but I feel like Final Fantasy IX takes the bloody piss. Like, it really does with these fucking moments. But, as I say, like, visually, I feel, as much as I wasn't a fan of 8, I feel like the visuals were a step down, personally. I feel like 8 had better visuals. Like, Final Fantasy VIII looks like the later Growlancer games. If you've ever played Growlancer 5 and 6, like, those are PS2 games. That's what Final Fantasy VIII looks like. It looks like one of those games. Final Fantasy IX still looks like the old PS1 games. It's just not as good. It's just not as good as Final Fantasy VIII in my opinion. I feel that it's a graphical downgrade personally. I think that Final Fantasy VIII looks better. It has more interesting aesthetic. Final Fantasy IX doesn't have that aesthetic to it, and I just feel that it's a downgrade, personally speaking. And I just couldn't get over the fucking anthropomorphic characters that this game shoves in your faces. I'm just not into it. I was not a fan of that, and that was when I first looked in this game. I remember watching a PlayStation 1 demo disc of this game, and a demo, and just seeing the anthropomorphic characters in the game, it just completely baffled me. I was like, this is weird. This is such a weird game. And that's before I even played it. And then I played it and I'm like, oh my god, this is terrible. You know? Well, I didn't go into it with the highest of expectations. I'm really honest, but it was worse than I expected. I expected it to be, I expected it to redeem itself, but it didn't. It wasn't good, and I absolutely hated the protagonist. So, Final Fantasy IX, I'm sorry people. I know that you guys were going to leave nasty comments to me in the comment section that are going to threaten to murder me for murdering your family or something because I hated on your beloved favourite Final Fantasy IX. But the thing about it is that, you know, I just did a video trashing on World of Warcraft and people tried to do that to me before. What makes you think you're going to be any different? You know, bring it. If you're going to do that, bring it. You won't last long because you're just going to get shadow banned anyways. But you want to start this with me? You want to start an argument with me about how Final Fantasy IX is better than everything else? Go for it. But if you're going to start getting shirty with me, and you're going to start with the stupid petty insults, then you will be shadow banned. I'm not messing about, people. After all of this bullshit that Legend of Leo had to put up with for shitting on Final Fantasy IX, and shitting on like Final Fantasy XI, I'm not putting up with it. Like, I'm just gonna, like, if you start on me, you are not going to get anything of value out of it. It's just that I'll never speak to you again, because you will be shadow banned and nobody will know that you even commented. So what's the point in even trying? If you want to make a rational discussion, and you want to actually just say, oh, I actually like Final Fantasy IX, disagree with you, but you know, I respect your opinion. If you want to say that, be my guest. I mean, it's not going to change my mind on it. I'll just say, okay, a lot of people do. A lot of people like Final Fantasy IX, I just don't. I just think that it's horrendous. But if you like the game, more power to you. I just despise this game. I fucking hate this game with a violent passion. But you like this game, so clearly it catered to somebody, didn't it? Clearly somebody likes this hot mess. You know, one man's trash is another man's treasure. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But I know people are going to get at me in the comments anyways, because this is fucking YouTube. It's a fucking battleground that people are fighting wars over because their opinion is different. You know, it's just like, you know, I just think the whole thing is just laughable when people do this. It's just so hilarious when people have to fucking get so angry and infuriated over an opinion. It's just like, come on guys, like, can you just grow a pair of balls and just deal with the fact that someone hates your favourite game of all time? I mean, people hate on my favourite game of all time all the time, Valve Profile 2. People say, oh yeah, Valve Profile 1 is amazing, but Valve Profile 2, that game was a disappointment. The Einherjar were not as good, and like, yeah, I get that all the time. It's just normal for me. I'm numb to it because I'm just used to people trashing on Valve Profile 2. So if I can put up with it, you can put up with me trashing on your favourite game. Right? And here's the thing, just because I trashed on your favourite game doesn't necessarily mean we won't see eye to eye with another favourite game. I understand if you don't want to watch me. I understand if you're watching this video, you see me hating Final Fantasy IX, you're just going to click off and say, I'm never watching this guy again. I understand that. I totally do. If you're going to be one of those people, I understand. I would do the same thing. I would genuinely do the same thing. If people have a take that I don't like, I'm just not watching. But the thing is, just don't make a big deal about it in the comments. You know, just don't start hurling insults my way in the comments just simply because I said that. Just understand, it's my opinion, you like it, good for you, I don't like it, that's all I'm going to say. You know, there's no beef, we don't hate you, just hate the game, you know? I have friends that like this game, you know? People like RPG Archive, Spencer, he loves this game, he worships this game, you know? This is his religion. I mean, obviously I'm going to make fun of him for the fact that he likes a game that's got a protagonist that has a fucking... that looks like he's taking the longest shit in his life. But, because he's got the long, like, that tail and his fucking asshole. But, you know, like, I mean, yeah, I'll make fun of people for liking games, but I'm, you know, at the end of the day, they like the game, that's on them, they like the game, so be it. I can't change their mind or their opinions. What's the point in even trying? You like Final Fantasy IX, good for you. I don't. You know, but that doesn't mean I hate the person. You know, I don't. I just want to make that clear before we actually start wars in the fucking comment section, because I know it's going to happen the moment I put this game on there. But anyway, we're moving on to Final Fantasy X. Now this is a weird one because I actually played X-2 first. I did, and because of that, my experience playing Final Fantasy X was weird because I was going backwards. You know, I started with the sequel and I went backwards. But the thing is, I actually didn't originally own Final Fantasy X. I actually borrowed it off a friend and continued his playthrough. I did eventually restart my own playthrough and I never actually finished that. But I just finished my friend's playthrough when I copied his data onto my memory card so I could just... And the whole idea was so that I could help him finish the game. I don't know, because he was struggling on the boss, and I just thought, well, I'll just continue playing this, why not? Because I was basically, he gave me his data so I could beat the boss for him, so I could give it him back. But obviously I still had the data on my memory card, and being a kid back then, I was just like, well, I could actually use this to my advantage and finish the game quickly, and then I realised, yeah, I didn't really do this legit, I'm using a friend's file. So I restarted and I never finished it. But I did finish it on my friend's file, and that's kind of Final Fantasy X. Now, first thing I want to talk about Final Fantasy X. The best part about Final Fantasy X, I'm going to talk about the good parts. This game's aesthetic is fantastic. The best part about Final Fantasy X is the aesthetic, because I feel that this game's aesthetic is, like, the way they handle the aesthetics and the world in this game is absolutely brilliant. All of the locations really stand out and are memorable because of how they are aesthetically designed, and I'm talking both musically and visually. I mean, the music was done by Hamazu and Junya Nakano, and I know that Junya Nakano especially is really good. I feel both of them are good at what they do. I think that their soundtrack in this game is pretty damn good. It's one of the better soundtracks in the series, definitely. Not the best. I mean, I still prefer Final Fantasy V, but I still like this soundtrack nonetheless, and I feel that it does a fantastic job of illustrating the world and illustrating the emotions at the moment and trying to express a certain thing. I feel that they nailed it. I feel that Hamazu and Junya Nakano nailed that. I don't know who did what music. I never do with those two composers. They're always working together for the most part, so it's hard to tell which is the one that I need to praise the most. But I'm just going to give praise to both of them for this because they were the main driving force of it, and I feel that they did a pretty good job with the soundtrack of the game, and the aesthetics of the game were pretty solid as well. This is an early PS2 game, and it looks fucking phenomenal for an early PS2 game. Yeah, it really does. There's some of the locations like Marcolania Forest. That place is amazing. That place is fucking fantastic. From an aesthetic standpoint, that place is amazing. It's just one of a kind. You'll never have another one. And that's where Final Fantasy X excels in its aesthetics. I'll definitely say that. It's the one thing that makes this game what it is and makes this game stand out the most. And that's one of the good things about this game that I really absolutely have to highlight. A lot of people don't talk about that, and the thing about it is this game has its critics. I get it, I mean, everybody knows the time where fucking Spoony tore this game about an asshole, but he never really complimented the visuals because, Spoony was so focused on the plot and the story that he didn't really focus on the aesthetics because he's an amateur reviewer. And that's what amateur reviewers do. But let's be honest, he's not a reviewer, he's an entertainer, but I hate the fact that he labelled it as review when he just spoiled the entire plot of the game. I hate reviewers that do that, people. I despise that. And yeah, Spoony, it was entertaining, but at the same time, in retrospect, he was a bit of a dick, and he kind of is, based on what we've seen, later on, he's kind of, fallen off, hasn't he? And we all know why. But yeah, I mean, a lot of what he was saying about the narrative is valid. I'm not going to say that it isn't, but he did make a big fuss of a lot of things like the whole Blitzball thing. I mean, come on, it's fantasy, You could just, surely you can willingly suspend your disbelief to some degree, given the fact that it's a fucking JRPG. I mean, come on, it's the basic requirement, Nobody fucking questions the fact that, in Valve Profile you could just bring people to life out of fucking thin air, seemingly, But I mean, yeah, there's objects, but what I mean. It's just somehow they just regain their old body like it was yesterday, Nobody questions all of this stuff because it's JRPGs. Why are we questioning this stuff? But I will say one thing, and I will say this. I feel that just like Final Fantasy VII, the story could have been executed better. It's basically a retelling of Grandia 2. That's what it is. It's basically the Grandia 2 of the Final Fantasy series. We've had the Persona of the Final Fantasy series, we've had the Star Ocean of the Final Fantasy series, we've had the Xenogears of the Final Fantasy series, which Final Fantasy VII was originally... Xenogears was originally supposed to be Final Fantasy VII, that's a fun fact, and that's what Final Fantasy VII is. Final Fantasy X is the Grandia 2. The Grandia 2 of the Final Fantasy series, and, well... I feel Grandia 2 did a better job narratively than Final Fantasy X in every single way because it was more nuanced. It had a lot more character development and more deep character interactions and connections and just more interesting themes overall. Whereas this game, I feel that it's more basic level at what they tried to do with Grandia 2. Compared to what they did with Grandia 2, this is more basic level stuff, and yeah, it doesn't hold up as well because of it, and I feel that the characters, I kind of get what they're doing with Tidus. I kind of do. I mean, he's just kind of like... I mean, he's another character that's kind of like Zidane in the sense that he's a loser, but the difference between Zidane and Tidus is Tidus isn't completely full of himself. He's humbled. He's humbled very quickly, and because he's humbled very quickly, he eventually slowly begins to mature, whereas Zidane doesn't. There's an actual development for Tidus, there isn't for Zidane. But the thing about it is that with Final Fantasy X, I feel that they really could have fleshed things out a little bit better. I mean, it's like, for example, you have characters like Auron, who, he's got this backstory of him just being like this stuck-up dude, this stuck-up guy who's just kind of thinks that he fancies himself like this know-it-all guy, but really he's just kind of like some dumb, like, he's just kind of like this stuck-up guy who's just kind of annoying, who's just trying to sound more important than he actually is. And then he gets his ass kicked, and then suddenly he just becomes this bad motherfucker out of thin air, and like, he doesn't really have that development. He's one of those characters that is just kind of like, but like Dylan in Valkyrie Vow 2, how he's just kind of there, but he's like the cool guy of the group. He's a badass because he's got a big sword and he kicks ass, and he's got big muscles. But like, you can have those big muscly cool guys, I get it, but like I say, I just feel that his backstory wasn't fleshed out well enough, and they could have done more with him. It's like with Riku, for example, another character that just, they could have done so much more with Riku. Like, she's just there to just act as like the representative of the Al Bhed. That's literally all she's there to do. There's not really anything else to her character besides that. Like, there's nothing, and she's just kind of there. Numa and Waka were just kind of like the fucking clueless boomers who are just kind of like, well, it's always been this way, so we just keep following the tradition, keep following, and yeah, they're basically one and the same. There's not really too much about it. They're basically just like those people that just go to church just simply because they want to have like a high social standing. That's basically what they are, those types of boomers, that are everywhere, and I feel that the characters for the most part are pretty flat. I mean, you could argue that Tidus has some growth, and that Yuna has like some kind of a character arc, but besides that, there's not really too much, and I don't really feel that they are particularly amazing characters. I think they're just okay. I think the story as a whole is just average. It's not bad though, it's just average. The combat system in this game is pretty good. This is modern turn-based combat, so I'm instantly for it. This is where we got like the first, I feel like it's not the first, but it's like probably the most well-known modern turn-based combat systems out there. A lot of people don't understand the difference between old school and modern turn-based combat. I did a theory crafting video on that, and it's on my channel, and it's my theory crafting on turn-based combat. You'll be able to see it's got, like, on the thumbnail, it's basically got Shadow Heart on the thumbnail, so you'll know what it is. But yeah, like, that, I really don't like old school turn-based combat, and Final Fantasy X gave us modern turn-based, and I love that. Like, the turn-based combat in this game, it's so easy to go back to, it's aged really well. My only gripe with Final Fantasy X, like, gameplay-wise, is the post-game is probably the worst post-game in the entire fucking series. And I'm not saying because there isn't much content, there's a lot. I'm saying it because of the amount of fucking grinding you have to do in this game to get anywhere in the post-game. And the problem is that the grind is literally all there is, because there isn't that much depth. When you get to the end of the game, it just comes down to a case of just abusing the fucking overdrives of like Waka and Riku to win. That's basically what it is. Like, it's just rack up hits and just abuse like skills like quick hit, and that's basically it. Just the strategies are always more or less the same, like for the post game stuff, and it's just like you just need to get the gear. You just need to get like a lot of fights in the arena, for example, are just gear checks. That's literally what they are. It's like just gear check fights. That's basically what Final Fantasy X's post game is. There's no real strategy or anything like that is really goes into it. And well, I can see the appeal in that. I just feel like it's way too grindy. Like, grinding the spheres every time you level up, I hated that. I mean, I'm not against the sphere grid, but having to get the spheres to actually level up, while it isn't a problem in the main story, in the post-game it's an absolute nightmare to farm them. So yeah, that's my issue with Final Fantasy X, and it really starts to show its weaknesses at that point. But would I say that it's a crap or boring game? No. Would I say it's a superb game? No. But would I say it's adequate? Yes. Where would I put Final Fantasy X? This is tricky. I mean, I feel like 7 had a bigger impact on me. I do feel that 7 had a bigger impact on me personally. But 10 is probably the better game to go back to. If I was going to recommend anybody to go back to a Final Fantasy game, I would recommend them to go back to 10 more than 7. But because you know, like, as I say, it is the better game. But on a personal level, I'd put 7 just simply because of the impact it had for me. So you've got to understand, even though I'm putting it between 7 and 2, even though I'm putting it here, do understand that I am aware that this is a better game than 7 objectively, in terms of like a lot of things, but I feel like that, and a lot of people who like Final Fantasy VII will agree with me, Final Fantasy VII for the time, you know, you could argue it's nostalgia, but I feel that I made a good enough argument when I mentioned that moment in the game with the world map. That moment is just, it outclasses anything that Final Fantasy X ever did. And that's why it is in there. But I feel overall, if we take that moment out as a game, like, 10 is better. But, like, because of that moment, I have to put 7 above 10, just simply for that moment alone. And there's not really too much between them, really. I mean, they're both kind of enjoyable games. I mean, like, in the grand scheme of things, in the greater scope, if you talk about JRPGs as a whole, they're both pretty mediocre games. But in terms of Final Fantasy games, they're both some of the better ones, if you ask me. So, yeah. I wasn't going to count these sequels until now, because I feel that I have to talk about this one, just simply because it's very relevant to what I've just spoken about, and that's Final Fantasy X-2. So here's the deal about Final Fantasy X-2. I played this before 10. When I played this, you've got to remember that this was, I was really young when I played this game. I don't even think I even hit puberty by the time I played this game. So you can imagine the look on my face when I was playing. There was a bunch of fucking scantily clad girls, you know, and I was just like, I wasn't like, I know that there were a lot of people that were turned on when they first played this game because of all of the fucking fan service, but for me, I was just like, what the hell am I playing this girly ass shit for? But I will say this, you know, my favourite game of all time, Valk Profile 2 Sumeria, the main protagonist is a female, so this, as I say, I'm not against it now as an older person, you know, I don't mind playing as female characters now, I don't mind it, but at the time when I was a kid, I was kind of traumatized by the intro of this game and just how girly it was. Like, I just felt that my manhood was being challenged by this game. I was violently insecure playing this, like, why am I playing this fucking game? And, you know, like, because I thought I was getting Final Fantasy X, and not this, and I got this and I'm like, oh my god, what the fuck? What the fuck am I playing? And yeah, but at the time you gotta understand, I mean, I know that this statement has aged like ours, like it's literally aged like spoiled milk, because now the Final Fantasy series is fucking terrible, but at the time, I was just like, well, you know, and I said this with Final Fantasy VIII as well, I was like, well, it's Final Fantasy, so surely it gets better, because every Final Fantasy I've played up to this point, you know, even if it's a game that has a really awkward start, or a start that I wasn't fond of, they eventually pull through in the end, so surely this game's going to get better. And when I say it got better, well, I feel that this game is one of those cases where I just kind of warmed up to it. It was just one of those things where it just kind of, like, at first when it hits you at the beginning, it traumatizes you, but if you keep going, it kind of mellows out a bit more, and it's just like, it becomes, it's not as crazy and extreme, like, willpower, even though it has its moments, but yeah, eventually it just, you know, it just becomes more normal stuff, and yeah, I just kind of go on with it, and I mean, it's a really weird game. Like, I would describe Final Fantasy X-2 as like the polar opposite of the Bouncer. Like, the Bouncer is like the manliest, it's like the manliest Japanese game. Like, I know it's not the manliest Japanese game. That'd be F-Zero GX. F-Zero GX is the manliest Japanese game, but it's just like this, like, three dudes that are just really manly, doing manly stuff. Like, that's basically what the Bouncer was. And Final Fantasy X-2 is the female version of that. It's three girls doing girly stuff. And they brought the same composers back from the Bouncer. The exact same composers did this soundtrack. So it is literally the female version of the Bouncer, but it's a JRPG, not a beat-em-up. So, you know, I mean, you've got fucking Pain, who is literally the female version of Volt Kruger. I mean, just look at the two characters and you'll see what I mean. They've got the same resemblance. They're both wearing leather and have that broody, edgy look to them. It's kind of funny in a way. I can't not make comparisons between 10-2 and the Bouncer. I absolutely cannot not make those comparisons. But yeah. Gameplay-wise, I prefer 10. I think 10's got a better combat system. Aesthetic-wise, they're both the same, really. I mean, I think, like, the Bouncer's composers, I mean, I feel that the Bouncer's soundtrack should tell you all you need to know. If you've never heard Volt Kruger's theme song, you haven't lived. I'm just gonna come out and say it. Like, if I was a professional wrestler, my dream professional wrestling theme song would be, like, going out as a professional wrestler, would be Volt Kruger's theme. And I think a lot of people would say the same thing, because it's one of the most badass theme songs of all time. It's up there with probably Phoenix's theme from F-Zero GX, that's another one. Some really badass theme songs, and he's got one of the most badass ones. So, you know, there's some pretty epic, like, metal tracks in this game as well, and techno and stuff. But it's a very different soundtrack. I will say this, I do kind of like the Junior Nakano and Hamazu tracks from 10. I just feel that they're better with the ambience, and that's what 10's best at. And because it focuses on the atmosphere and the ambience, I feel that Hamazu and Junior Nakano, like, capitalized on that. And since that's the strongest part of 10, I do prefer their songs over 10-2's soundtrack, just simply because 10-2's soundtrack doesn't blend in as well with the landscapes and the atmosphere. It's different. It's not terrible, but I don't think it's as memorable as the Bouncer. The Bouncer's soundtrack is fucking kick-ass. That soundtrack is just amazing. I mean, there's not much of it, but what's there is fucking amazing. Like I say, Volt Kruger's thing is just god tier. And the fact that when you play as Volt in the game, you hear that every fight is just amazing. I'm sorry that I'm talking about the Bouncer so much, but how can I not? Like, I'm talking about Final Fantasy X-2 here, which is the literal, like, female equivalent of the Bouncer. I mean, there's some odd minigames, like the fucking massage minigame. I didn't even know what that was all about. I didn't understand that as a kid, because I played this game before I hit puberty, people. So I didn't understand the whole sexual, like, connections with that whole minigame. I didn't get it. I was just like, what are you doing? But now I get it. I'm just like, oh god. This is not a game you want to show your kids, is it? But at the same time, your kids probably won't get it. But if you're not, you know, if you're an adult, you definitely get it. You definitely get it. Yeah, this was a weird one. Very weird game. Very weird game. Where would I even put this? I mean, like, here's the thing. I don't think Final Fantasy X-2 is a bad game. Like, I'm just gonna put it here. I mean, I think this game is adequate. I think this game is definitely not going to be for everybody. I mean, but it's not so bad that it's going to ruin your life bad, you know? I mean, I've played worse JRPGs out there that are more insufferable than this. I'm looking at you, Final Fantasy IX. I'm looking at you, motherfucker. Yeah, fucking Zidane. Fucking bitch. I'd rather fucking play as fucking Yuna than Zidane. I think Yuna has fucking more balls and more testosterone than that guy. I legit feel that Yuna has more testosterone than fucking Zidane. That's not even up for debate, people. But, yeah, and Pain definitely does. But, regardless, like, I don't think this game's that bad. I mean, the gameplay, like, the combat system's still ATB, it still works well enough. I mean, it's definitely not the Final Fantasy game that you're going to say, oh my god, this is the must-play Final Fantasy game. And it's definitely not the Final Fantasy game you're going to recommend to all your friends, you know? It's the Final Fantasy game that you could play. It's just like, oh, it's alright. And I think that's the best way to look at this game. It's alright. It's not really amazing. Like, does it deserve the Final Fantasy moniker? Well, given the fact that Final Fantasy's track record in recent years isn't brilliant, I'd say it does. You know, Final Fantasy can mean anything nowadays. And if this is Final Fantasy, well, that basically sums the whole series up. I think that's basically Final Fantasy in a nutshell. Anything goes. Every single game in the Final Fantasy series is kind of like something different. There's never a game that is the same in the series. There's always something new and different with each entry. And that's something you kind of got to appreciate with it, but at the same time, I do feel that the overall quality of the games has declined personally. Since this game particularly, which is kind of a hint as to what's to come. Because it's not looking good from here on out, folks. If you notice, the adequate one is almost full. We've got 2 superbs. I'm just going to tell you right now, there's no more. There's no more superbs. I'm just going to tell you everything you need to know. Right, Final Fantasy XI. I did play this game for a few minutes. That was enough for me to know that this game was garbage. One of the worst UI interfaces I've ever seen in my life. Like, bland aesthetic. How do you go from... I mean, I get it's an MMO, so of course there's going to be more limitations there, but like, how did you go from like Final Fantasy X to this? Like, oh my god, it's so ugly and grimy as the aesthetic. Just, everything about this game was just so off-putting for me. I just didn't get it. And this is the thing, I played World of Warcraft, and I trashed on World of Warcraft in a video recently, and I got a lot of fucking hate for it. So that should tell you all you need to know about MMOs. I hate them. I hate all MMOs, including this one. Another game that wastes your life and wastes your money. That's what Final Fantasy XI is, and for that reason it gets cracked here. It's garbage. Fuck this game. Anyways, Final Fantasy XII. This is an interesting one. Because Final Fantasy XII is actually, it's kind of tied in with Vagrant Story. It's Vagrant Story 2. That's what Final Fantasy XII is. I got a Vagrant Story 0. I don't know where it is in the Eve-Elise timeline, but it is tied to the Eve-Elise saga. Because it's Mitsuno, I think it's Mitsuno. Is that the guy who did the Tactics games? Yeah, it's one of his games, and it became a mainline entry for some reason. Here's the thing about Final Fantasy XII. What do I like about it? I like the voice acting. The concept of the story is somewhat interesting, but badly executed. But it's interesting concept. The music is phenomenal. I'm not saying that it's the best soundtrack of all time. It's not Valkyrie Profile 2 levels of amazing. I love that soundtrack. That's my favourite soundtrack of all time. But I love this soundtrack because Hitoshi Sakimoto did the music, and when he's doing music for fucking like games like Ocean Sphere and Final Fantasy XII, I love that fucking music. And Final Fantasy XII, oh my god, you could tell that he was making a Final Fantasy game. It was just like, right, I'm gonna give it my all, and he fucking did. This game's soundtrack is on a whole other level. It's way better than anything Uematsu's ever done. Better than even Hamazu's work and Yunya Nakano's work. Like, he's the best composer of them all, of all the Final Fantasy composers, by far. By fucking far. I fucking adore the soundtrack of Final Fantasy XII, and I do listen to it rather frequently. I don't play the game very frequently though, because I don't like the game. I think the game itself sucks. I think the game itself is not a good game. And I hate the gameplay, man. The biggest gripe I have with Final Fantasy XII is a gripe I have with a lot of games, but Final Fantasy XII is one of the games that really stands out for me, because, and I feel that this goes with all the Matsuda games. Like, for some reason Matsuda is one of those people, a bit like Ogawa, who's just got this sadistic side to him, you know? He's just one of those people that just wants to see the player suffer. So he puts all these little troll game design things in his games, and this is one of those examples of troll game design where I'm just going to put a line of stem needle traps in front of the save point, so that if you're going to walk to the save point after like 2 hours of gameplay, you're not using Libra or Float, you're going to take ridiculous damage and wipe and lose all your progress, because fuck you. Like, I hate traps in video games, people. I fucking despise them. That's a deal breaker. I just can't tolerate traps. I just hate them. I just don't like booby traps in games. I hate them. They are the one thing that I cannot stand and I cannot tolerate. And this game does it, and I hate it. I hate having all these traps I have to avoid. I hate the fact that this game punishes me for walking around. For fucking walking around. I'm all about walking around and roaming. That's my thing. That's my jam in these games. That's why I play these JRPGs for. I'm not talking about open world. I'm just roaming like a few areas. But when this game punishes you for that and makes you have to be very careful and tiptoe around to avoid getting hit by an explosion out of thin air, that's when I stop playing video games. You know? That's when I'm just like, I'm out. And that's basically what Final Fantasy XII does. On top of this, the combat is basically automated, so it just plays itself. it just plays itself. That's what the game does. I remember Captain of Solar streamed this game, and he went AFK at some point and during the final boss fight. And I swear, he didn't even press a single button in that final boss fight. He was AFK the whole fight, and then his party beat the final boss while he was AFK in the loo or whatever. And then the ending cutscene was playing, and he wasn't even there. And by the time he was back, the game was already over, and he didn't even know it. And we were all like, it was a funny moment, but it really said a lot about this game. It summed it all up. This is a game that plays itself, so what's the point? If you want to play a game like Final Fantasy XII with that combat that is actually good, I recommend playing Growlancer 6 or Growlancer 5. Play one of those games, because those games have missions that actually require you to be attentive at all times, otherwise you'll fail. So you actually have to be on the ball with those games. You can't just watch them fight, or just stand there as they just attack automatically. You actually have to constantly be moving them and doing different things, and there's a lot more strategy involved, and that's kind of how it has to be. That's kind of how it should be. Whereas with Final Fantasy XII, it's just basic level stuff. It's just set the AI to do basic commands, common sense, and then they do it, and then you win by just watching them auto fight. I mean, you can intervene in the middle of it by stopping time and having them do a different move, but you'll rarely ever do that because you won't need to. Because most of the fights in this game is just whack an enemy to death endlessly. It's even Growlancer has moves like Fierce Strike that deal more damage, and certain moves that can be used at certain moments that can hit large clusters of enemies, and AoE moves and stuff like that, and the spells are more useful in that game, whereas in this the magic isn't really that useful by comparison, other than the buffs. The buffs are the only magic spells you'll use for the most part, because other than that there's just no point. So it just becomes a game of just buff up and just sit there and watch. Just buff up and just whack things. It's basically the game. It's just boring game. And the story, even though it looks promising, it really isn't well executed, because while all this political intrigue is going on, you're basically off playing Indiana Jones hunting for these fucking rocks. And in the end it's just completely pointless, and it's why do you even bother with that? I guess it's to make it seem like a mainline Final Fantasy game with all the Final Fantasy usual stuff of just hunting the crystals, going on adventures and stuff, but it just feels jarring how you're seeing all this stuff, all this political stuff happening in the background, and you're just hunting for rocks and hunting in these ancient ruins and stuff. It's just I don't know, I just wasn't really a fan of the execution of the story, and it just kind of felt rushed in a lot of ways. So yeah, I wasn't really a fan of Final Fantasy XII overall, but the music is phenomenal, so I'm going to put it boring tier, not crap tier, just simply because the music is good. But as I say, that's my take on Final Fantasy XII. Right, I don't need to say much on this game, I'm just going to put it where it belongs. Final Fantasy XIII is the game that made me quit Final Fantasy. I pre-ordered this game early. I pre-ordered the Japanese release. I imported the Japanese version and pre-ordered it, and I paid a lot of money for this to get early access to this game. Taught me a valuable lesson, by the way. When I got this game, it was in Japanese obviously, but I realised that this game was terrible. This was one of the worst games I've ever played in my life. I mean, even Spencer said this was the worst game he ever played in his life. which is kind of funny because I have a similar experience. Like I pre-ordered this game and I didn't know how to bring myself, like how to put, because everyone at school wanted to know what the game was like, and I didn't know how to I didn't know how to break it to them. Like everyone was so excited. How do I break it to them that this game was a fucking dumpster fire? Like, oh my god. I'll tell you what the biggest problem with this game is. There's two big problems. One, the combat. I think Rory Binks, the Devil's Joker, summed it up best when he says, basically you press X. Or you press X twice. That's basically what he said. I mean, yeah, sure, you have like you swap roles and stuff, which requires you to press, instead of using the command menu to like switch roles, which you should do, instead you have a command menu that's completely pointless, and you have to go into a separate menu to have the actual menu that matters to actually change roles, because the game developers are stupid apparently, and they don't know how to design video games. So yeah, and because the active time battle system moves too fast, it's almost like real time. It's like you have to enter like 5 commands in one turn. 5 commands, you have to navigate a menu between all 5 of these commands in such a short span of time. And when you have real time, it's not pausable active time, it's not pausable real time, this is real time, you know, active real time combat. It's not ATB, which is pausable when you enter, like when you're scrolling menus. The time is ongoing while you're in the menus, which you can set that in other games, but having to enter 5 commands, and it goes by very quickly, by the way. This is the opposite of Final Fantasy IX's ATB goes. It goes by extremely fast. It's just, it doesn't work. So because of that, you just default to pressing auto battle all the time, just simply because it's more time efficient. It's like playing Warcraft 3. Yeah, sure, you can do this strategy where you use a specific group of units and do all these little things, but no, it's more efficient to just go on a regular build and just do it as fast as you possibly can, and just micro and APM better than the other team. You know, and that's basically what Final Fantasy XIII is. It's just like you auto battle because it's more efficient, because it costs less time than having to navigate through like all these menus to like pick the moves strategically. So there's no strategy involved, and aside from like swapping roles, which you'll be doing a lot because of how the game constantly demands you to swap roles all the time. And that's the whole combat system. It's really annoying, and I don't like it one bit. There's no real towns. I mean, you can go to certain areas that are kind of town-like, but you can never backtrack to these places, by the way. And there's no backtracking in this game at this point. Aside from a few moments in the game, there's no backtracking at all. And there's no, like, you can't go into stores or talk to many NPCs. Like, it's just like, because you're on the run the whole game, and you can go to these stores and like the internet or whatever and buy things on the internet somehow. I don't know how they're delivered to you, like, but I don't get it. But yeah, the biggest problem with this game, and I'll tell you what the biggest problem with this game is, and when I played the demo, I was hyped. I was so hyped for the game when I played the demo, because I did not see what happened after the demo. It was right after the demo where the story just collapses, when it's revealed that you become lessee. What this means is that you become a slave that will eventually turn into a crystal and be paralyzed forever. And if you don't obey, you become a zombie. My argument to this whole story is, well, I'm either going to be paralyzed or I'm going to become a zombie. Well, I think it'd be cooler to become a zombie. I'm going to become a Sith, a zombie, because it's more fun. So, what's the point doing anything? And that's the reason why the story sucks. What's the point? What is the point in even bothering at that point? There's no drive to do anything. And the moment that this whole revelation happens, then you just get chased by this organisation who turns out to be the people that you're supposed to be working for, but they end up chasing you down. It's just like, the whole thing makes no sense. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely... It's horrendous. And, yeah. It wasn't the last Final Fantasy game I played. The last Final Fantasy game I played was Dissidia Duodecim, and I hated that game, and that was enough. That was basically the universal sign of, I'm done with Final Fantasy forever. But this game was the biggest driving point and the biggest driving force of making me decide not to play a Final Fantasy game ever again. So, because of that, we're going to put all of these games that released after Final Fantasy XIII over here. I mean, these are going to be in crap anyways because they're MMOs, but I didn't play them. God, all this shit, all this fucking MMO shit, were these games ever fucking in because they're garbage? Didn't play that one either. Where's 16 there? I didn't play that. Right. We should also say that as well. I didn't play 7 Remake. I don't need to play 7 Remake. I'm going to talk about 7 Remake first before we even start. I've seen the combat of 7 Remake. The combat, from what I've seen of people playing it, it looks insufferable. I hate how I just hate how it works. It just looks like a very sloppy action game, like where you're hitting enemies, like your attacks don't have any weight to them whatsoever. It's like you're trying to be an action game, but you're too caught up in being an RPG, and you're trying to be this hybrid, and it just doesn't work. Either be an action game and function like an action game, a proper action game where your attacks actually have weight to them, have impact, where your staggers actually seemingly where it's more about the staggers than the number stacking. And that's the problem with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And I've noticed it. I don't even need to play the game to know this problem, because I've seen people play it. The fucking enemies, the regular enemies are like fucking hit point sponges, and you'll just hit them repeatedly. And I've seen it so many times when people play this game, they're up against all these hit point sponges, and they're not even under-leveled. It's just they deal so little damage, and it's just it just looks horrendous for me to play, and it's just it's not the good aspect. It's not what the thing that makes action games fun. The thing that makes action games fun is, the impact of the moves and stuff, and I get it. A lot of people, and this is the thing, a lot of people trash Star Ocean 5, the boss fights of Star Ocean 5, for having that problem, that same problem. But the thing about the thing about Star Ocean 5 is the regular enemies, you can still at the very least juggle them and do all the combo stuff. It's just the bosses that you can't. Well, Final Fantasy VII, it's almost like the bosses from Star Ocean 5. It's like the regular enemies are almost like what the bosses in Star Ocean 5 are, in the sense that that's kind of how they seem to me. I don't know, it's just piling damage on more than anything is basically the name of the game. Maybe that's just my assumption. Maybe there's more to it than that if I actually played it, but I'm just going to be honest here, people. The combat does not look appealing to me. I just don't like how the enemies seem to have so much HP and just be hit point sponges, and it just doesn't look appealing, and that's why I never played the game. But another reason why I never played Final Fantasy VII Remake is why? I've played the original Final Fantasy VII as a kid. I've been there, worn the t-shirt, done it. Why do I need to play it again? I've already played Final Fantasy VII. I want to move on. I want to play something different. I don't want to play the same game all over again just because a few people just want to relive the old days, the good old days. I don't care. And this is the thing, for people that play Final Fantasy VII Remake, thinking that they're just going to get into Final Fantasy VII and doing it. I mean, if you want to play Remake first, go ahead. But if you think that playing Remake is going to give you that Final Fantasy VII experience, you're wrong. And I'll tell you why, because the remake of Final Fantasy VII ends. It's done in parts, but the first part of the remake of Final Fantasy VII ends just before the best moment in the entire game. So there's an entire sequel, called Rebirth, which is essentially, because you have Final Fantasy VII, you have Final Remake, you have Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate, and both of these are in the Midgard portion. Rebirth is in the after Midgard portion, and the thing about it is that transition between the Midgard section and the out of Midgard section is the best part of the whole game. And you don't even get that transition in Remake because they split it between games. Because they split it between two different fucking games, you missed out on the best part of the whole fucking game. Fuck off, Square Enix, you missed the point. It's that moment that was the best moment and you took it out. Fuck off. That's all I have to say about Square Enix for Final Fantasy VII Remake. Anyway, we're left with a few weird games here, people. A few games that are just... Where do I begin? I'm just going to do my order that they're showing. 12 Relevant Rings didn't play, not really that interested in 12 to play. Final Fantasy IV The After Years is garbage. It's better than 9 though. I'll put 9 here. It's not a number more than the release. Final Fantasy IV The After Years is an absolute disaster, and it totally exposes the weaknesses of this game, because this game worked well enough as a standalone game, but the moment they made a sequel to this game, it really started to show the it really started to show the scars that this game had. It really started to show this game's weakness and this game's age, because they didn't really know how to take the story in a way that was interesting. And because the characters and because the world and the story of 4, while it was good at the time, is so archaic by today's standards, the only thing that they can do is like reuse the old tropes for the characters, and it just doesn't work by the time that After Years is made, because by the time After Years came out, like, this story is dated, and it really shows, because it's just trying to be fan servicey of it, and it just doesn't work because the characters are so bland by that point, and like the new characters they added are even more bland, and like this, like, it's just more of the same shit again. And they try and do like something like, oh yeah, Kane's like going through this whole arc and that lot, and Kane's gone evil again or whatever. It's just like, you know, like they do the same shit again, and it's just like, oh no, that's the time that you need to. That's the time where the story needs to end. You know, it's kind of like World of Warcraft, when you had like Warlords of Draenor, where they basically redid the fucking Rom Hellscream versus Manoroth scene in Warcraft 3, which was amazing, by the way, and they just thought, oh, let's make a homage to it, let's pay homage to it for the fanboys. And it's just like, why? You just butchered an amazing cutscene and just made an inferior version that was just basically pretentious, and, you know, it's like, stop trying to be Warcraft 3. You're not Warcraft 3. Stop trying to cash in on the nostalgia of Warcraft 3. You tore Warcraft 3 apart, so fuck you, Blizzard. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Final Fantasy IV After Years. I know I went off topic there, but yeah. Okay, so here we get the tactics games. Now, I think it goes without saying that I'm not a fan of Mitsuda's games. I mean, I played 12 and I hated that, and yeah, unfortunately Final Fantasy Tactics has the same problem. I'm not even the biggest fan of tactical RPGs either, people. The only tactical RPG that I can stomach is Profile Covenant of the Plume. I mean, maybe there are tactical RPGs out there that I like, but I've not really ever been in the mood to try any others. So yeah, I've never played the tactics games because of that, and also because they also have traps in them, and you know, I don't like traps, and yeah, that's another reason why I haven't played Stranger of Paradise either, because that also has traps in it, because it's a fucking Soulsborne, so I'm not a fan of that either. Type 0, another game like Final Fantasy fucking VIII. It's another high school fucking simulator bullshit game where you're in a military high school, not interested, will never play it. I think that's World of Final Fantasy. No interest in that game. I don't even know that game. Why? I just looked that game up and I was like, what? Who thought this was a thing? Who thought this up? This is dumb. So that just leads to the Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core. I know Rush Hour trashed on Crisis Core, but I'm going to be honest, I actually liked Crisis Core. I actually did. I mean, is it the best game ever? No. But is it a nice game? I mean, yeah. It's got a pretty cool soundtrack. I like the music. I feel that the gameplay, it's action, it's a bit like mindless, but I don't mind mindless action. And yeah, like, I feel that out of all the Final Fantasy VII spin-offs and sequels and all that shit, like, this is probably the best one. I actually feel that this game had an impact. I did. Like, even when I was burning out of Final Fantasy VII, playing Crisis Core was like a different experience to some degree. Yeah, I actually kind of like this one. I'm going to put this one adequate, but as I say, I don't think it's amazing. And yeah, I'm putting it above 7 because even though 7 had that moment, I feel that Crisis Core is easier to go back to than 7. And it's just more. It's a more. I mean, yeah, it has a lot of bloat in the game, but I just think if you stick to the main story, it's a lot more concise and less convoluted because it actually fixes the problem of 7's convoluted narrative. I mean, yeah, it adds a bit more convolution to it to some degree, but I actually don't mind it. I feel that Crisis Core is actually quite decent. I like the whole finale of the game. I think it was a good moment, and I think that like the music was really good, and like I feel that Zack as a character is likable. He's not a fucking bell end like Zidane. He's actually cool-headed and likable. I mean, you could argue that he's a bit bland, but I don't think that's inherently an issue. You know, I liked his relationship with Angeal. I thought that was pretty nice, and yeah, it was a fan service game for Final Fantasy VII fans, but I feel like it tied a few holes and it had some good moments in there. It was decent, but like I say, I understand the people that don't like it. I get that, but I liked it. I liked Crisis Core. I like how Dirge of Cerberus isn't even on here. I don't even need to mention that. I've already done a video. I've done a video on that game specifically, especially for all of you viewers who now you get to see exactly what I think of Dirge of Cerberus. Congratulations. Go watch my games I didn't finish video on Dirge of Cerberus. You can thank me later. I must warn you, I do get very angry and swear a lot, but I do that in every single video. I can't help it. I'm sorry, guys. But yeah, so you know, it's not rated PG, it's rated 18+. Just bear that in mind. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.